It's all about perspective, right? You never know. So if you approach life with that is the worst thing, this failure is going to keep me down, then you're never going to know and see where the other things could have led you to, right? But if you keep an even keel, like the farmer, right? And kind of take life as it comes with very few highs, or not let yourself go too high or not let yourself go too low, but kind of realize that this is just one page in this chapter or one chapter in this book, and the story isn't written out yet. Hi, I'm Jennifer Cohen, and I'm on Ever Forward Radio today. I'm the author of Bigger, Better, Bolder, and I'm going to teach you on this podcast how to be bold and go for the things you want and not just take the things you get. What did I have for breakfast? I had these amazing oatmeal bites
Oatmeal bites?
Yes. Mark Cuban, he invested in this company on Shark Tank that basically he like raves about them. And so he came on my podcast and we talked about it for like an hour, these stupid health bites.
How do you make an oatmeal into a bite?
Well, they're not just oatmeal. There's like, it's like a ball of deliciousness. There's like there's oatmeal and there's like some cranberries, and it's not normally what I eat for breakfast. I never would have this, but he told me about, I tried them once, we talked about it, and then it kind of reminded me of it. And now ever since then, I'm like addicted to these stupid things. So if I kind of allow myself once in a while to kind of break from my normal smoothie or omelet, basically.
Well, I know you're a big habit and ritual person. And
are we going? Is this part of the podcast?
We're live now. We're just going to jump right in.
Okay.
I pulled this from the Mind Pump guys, actually. After kind of seeing them in action, I realized that, they just been recording for a while, because I feel like that's the best part.
It's the best part. In fact, I agree. With my podcast, and by the way, the Mind Pump guys actually did do that to me on Friday. We were like talking for like 45 minutes about Dennis Rodman.
And then all of a sudden, you're like, the red light's been on the whole time.
And I'm like, are we going? And they're like, oh yeah, we're going. So, but yes, I agree. Like, I feel like you get the best content and the best conversations from people when there's not really a camera that you know is on you, staring at you with a mic on. You know what I mean? Because people they let their guard down. They're much more casual. They're much more comfortable in general. So. And you did it to me.
Another like content creator secret, like the reason why I choose to do the show in person, besides like getting, I think, better quality content in terms of video and audio, is for all of that, the real in life interactions.
Totally.
So in real life is always the best way to go, everybody.
I agree. Not only that, I think that people are starving for real life communication and connection and energy. Everything is just so much about social media and technology that we're losing the ability to socialize properly. Yeah. And I actually am very concerned about the next generation, because like there's like such an awkwardness I see that's happening.
They got started with digital.
They got started with it, right? Like it's a different time. So I think that's why now everything is on apps, like dating, relationships, any type of validation is now just through very disingenuous people, accolades from people you don't even know. It's kind of a sad state of affairs, if you ask me. But
well, let me ask you directly: is digital a way that we can actually live bigger, better, bolder? I mean, because you got to have a combination of it, right?
I think you can. I love that. I think you have to. You can definitely use digital, but I'm always someone who's a fan of in-person relationships, personal relationships, because at the end of the day, those personal relationships is your best asset and your best tool for business and obviously for personal life. That's the way I look at it anyway. I mean, there's nothing that replaces one-on-one connection and communication, right?
Yeah.
Like I can look into your eyes, I can kind of like see your body language and check out your gestures, and that's having the ability that also helps improve your emotional intelligence and your EQ, right? Which to me is one of the main assets of success in life. You have to have an EQ that's somewhat, I don't know, there, right? And if you don't have it, you got to practice it.
Well, not to be a spoiler alerter of the sorts, but we're here to talk about your great new book. And to kind of sort of jump to the end, one of the main sections I really wanted to talk about, and we can talk about what you have in the book, but just I know this is a part of your life and work in general. And in the section about asking for what you want, you break down kind of what I view as like my formula and people who find value in real life interaction. And honestly, how to get what you want, I think this is the secret sauce. And that's building authentic relationships. And you have to do that. There has to be some kind of in-person touch point. So can you expand on that for us? Building authentic relationships as part of this formula for asking for what you want. Like, why is that important and how can somebody go about that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, to me, like, it's exactly like just to kind of, we touched upon it a little bit, but I think number one, authenticity is extremely important, right? It's very hard to really get full transparency and full authenticity when you're just watching a screen all day or on social media, because people are going to always show you the highlight reel of their life, right? And that's not how you're really building relationships. It really has to be a person, an in-person, one-on-one dynamic and relationships. Now, I feel that the way to build and harness a real relationship is first is curiosity. Curiosity is the gateway to communication and connection, in my opinion. That if you don't have curiosity, start to cultivate it now, because that really is like the pathway, the gateway. And
curiosity about what though, exactly?
In people, I think people always ask me, like, how do you build an authentic relationship, right? How do you like even network authentically? And I feel like if you're going to an event and just like picking up a ton of different business cards, or now just like your IG handles.
Yeah. I don't even have a business card.
I know. I mean, I don't even have one anymore, but I'm just saying, like, in general, right? To me, it's first of all, quality over quantity, right? I mean, you want to build true relationships because those people are going to be the best way for you to kind of evolve and create the life that you want. And people also want to feel listened to and heard and chosen. And so when you don't make that authentic connection, those relationships are very vapid and very thin. So to me, when I build my relationships, I want to know about the person. I really want to delve. That's why I even started the podcast, right? Because I genuinely am curious about what makes people tick, what they like, what they don't like. And then you can kind of find common ground and touch points and ways that you guys are similar or not. And to me, that's why it starts with the communication part. I mean, the curiosity part, because that also helps with what you're going to talk about. Like, I have no problem asking people a ton of questions. I mean, and if they like it and if they are comfortable with the questions, great. Sometimes they're not, and I'm fine with that too.
How do you come up with your questions? Is it like, I have done enough homework about this person or this topic so I know what to dive into? Or how do you come up with them maybe in conversation, real life, just on the moment questioning?
Well, I'm not even talking, I'm talking even not from a podcast point of view. I'm talking about in general. Like, if I'm in an elevator with somebody and, just kind of making kind of like, I guess, stating the obvious awkwardness of that.
We're both
or
in
like,
this box
like,
together.
Here we are. Hi.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing here? Like, if you're on vacation, like, where are you from? Or
come here often.
But it's coming from the intention and the place it's coming from is a good place. And just because I'm curious, it doesn't necessarily have to lead to anything. It's just about the fact that I want to know. And a lot of people appreciate that, right? Because it's like, you kind of are also taking people off guard, right? Because people aren't expecting you to ask a question or even make that first move a lot of times. And right when you do that, it kind of lets the guard down a little bit. And like I said, you don't have to be doing this in a business setting in this very, very very formal business kind of setting. You can be practicing it in like an elevator or when you're standing in line at the grocery store. I feel like that's how people can even practice and harness that curiosity chop, right?
Yeah.
Because you'll always find that there's always something interesting and unique about somebody else if you just look for it or ask about it. And in my life, and maybe you can tell me when your experience is, my most valuable opportunities and experiences have never really necessarily come from the places I thought they would.
Or even tried to or counted on. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And the people who've actually helped me most in this world have never been the people that I thought would. It's always these like alternate ancillary like relationships that you meet like down the road that were really someone that you didn't really have in your purview, right? So if you're open and vulnerable and just put yourself out there, it's amazing what kind of connection you can actually make, and authentic connection.
Authentic being the key word there. And I think someone listening might be thinking, well, if I'm not starting from an authentic position, meaning I'm just doing this as an exercise for myself, it literally would have nothing to do about the person I'm talking to.
Right.
It's just more so, like you said, an exercise for myself. How do we get to that authenticity result if in our mind, our perception is we're not starting from an authentic starting point?
I think because with anything and everything, it requires practice and time, right? And if you have the desire to be and get better at something, then over time, as you do something repetitively over and over again, I believe that you do change the neuroplasticity in your brain to that becoming your new normal or the new person you are. I believe people can actually tweak and change their personality if they want to, right? So it first comes down to desire. Do you want to be better at this? Do you want to be more successful at X or Y? Do you want to have more in-depth, meaningful relationships? Do you want to have more success at work? At the end of the day, it all comes down to having and harnessing relationships and connecting points with other people. So having the self-awareness, having the desire will lead you eventually, if you want it bad enough, to actually make that kind of uncomfortable asking, so to speak, much more comfortable, right? And much more interested. Like, I'm not saying that somebody who is a 2 or a 1 in curiosity is going to become a 10, right? I'm not saying that. What I am saying, though, is that 2, with practice and commitment and focus, you can move that 2 to a 5 or a 6, right? That's what it is. It's not about being perfect. It's about having progression and being better, right? I mean, I could be playing basketball all day long. I'm not going to be LeBron James. But if I practice and kind of stay with it, I can I'll get a little bit better, right? I won't be as embarrassing with my kid that I would have been before. So it's not about being the best and having and all of a sudden having your complete outlook and personality completely changed, but you can always improve that baseline and improve something if you want to. And that's how I look at everything.
So let's take it a step further and literally get to a bold part of this tactic here.
Yes, please.
In relationships, I've found there's going to inevitably be a time when you have an ask. Not just an ask of curiosity and building kind of this muscle, so to speak, but I have something in mind I need help with or I want to do, and I know that you're the person. And now I've been putting in the reps of building this relationship, and taking that step is pretty bold, I think. And all right, because nobody really likes to ask something of somebody or feel like they're being an inconvenience or whatever.
Right, it's uncomfortable.
So how do we get comfortable with that uncomfortable aspect? How do we boldly make an ask at the end now or somewhere in our journey of this relationship building while still being of value and thinking of ultimately we need to make this a win for them, but we have a starting point ask.
Right. Well, first of all, you actually just said something, you just hit the nail on right there on the head, is that how can we turn the tables and maybe not lead with the ask right away, but how can you be of service to that person? And I think a lot of times people get wrong the fact that, well, if you're in a place of, you're not in a place of power and you're asking somebody who is in a more place of power that you're irrelevant or you can't make a difference, you're absolutely wrong, right? It's not always about something that is so obvious, but for an example, I'm just going to give you an example, right? My little girl loves gymnastics, right? I'm just giving you an example. And this young woman who wanted to work with me on something, she made enough of a wherewithal to see that I had a kid who liked gymnastics. Well, she used to be a champion gymnast when she was younger. Okay. So she found a connecting point that would make me interested in what, right away, and saying, I noticed that your daughter's I used to do this. I would love to show your daughter a couple pointers if you have the time or interest. So not to say I'm going to take her up on it necessarily, But the fact is you can always find an in if you want to, if you just do a little bit of homework or just see what it is. I always think that, that's what happens. I think a lot of times when people are successful, right, in that way, everyone just goes with what they can do for somebody else, right? It's a breath of fresh air when somebody turns the table, and it could be just a very small little thing, but acknowledgement and notice of how someone can be of help to them goes a long way, right? People remember those things.
Yeah.
So that's the first part. The second part is, so I always try to find, and that's why the curiosity part that we talked about is so important and so relevant to really building those authentic relationships, because in the building, in the foundation and building blocks of those things, you can also find out so many ways and so many things that there is in common.
The answers just come pouring out if you're paying attention. If you're paying attention, curious, like you said,
and paying attention. So there's not an absolute, like I don't necessarily say go, and I've done this before too, but it's about reading the room and knowing what you're doing. And I believe that also naivety is like a big strength. And I talk about that in my book, right? Because the less you know, the less experience you have, the more bold you're going to be to don't go for a huge ask for someone when you are uncomfortable.
And it's probably going to be perceived as not potentially as calculated or scripted, or, oh, this person clearly, this is coming across like you clearly have been planning this, or kind of like this seems kind of formulated.
Exactly.
You can get a pulse very quickly on genuine and authentic.
I think most people, I believe, would get a pulse on someone's intention and if they're coming from a good place. Some people just, it's about, again, like having the EQ to understand where someone's coming from and what you're doing and how you're doing it. But it's not, my entire message is don't overthink it too much. Kind of like go for the bold, try it, and see what happens. Because a lot of times you may not even get that particular thing, but usually another opportunity will present itself that you never even knew available just by going after it.
You'll get what you need, probably not what you want. Or something that you didn't even think was possible.
Or that what you actually did want, but you didn't even know it existed. That's really more the message. It's that my whole philosophy and my whole platform really is about chasing what you actually want, not just taking what's in front of you, not just acquiescing to the good enough that was handed to you before you, and like taking agency and ownership of your own life and making shit happen. And it's not about someone else making shit happen for you. It's about you being a little bit more involved in the decisions, right? Because it's not about the circumstances that you were really given. It's really life and success becomes about the decisions that you make with the circumstances that you have and going for it.
I think the circumstances is where a lot of us, myself included, used to be in terms of this is my limiting factor. I will never achieve this because of where I am now. I will never have that because of how I was raised or my job or my relationship or even my physical capabilities or appearance. How do we change our own mind and perspective on our current circumstances so that I don't have to accept what I've been given? I can change my circumstances. Basically, I am my circumstances, and I can use this to my advantage.
Do you know what I find so interesting is I did this talk at MIT a year ago, right? And I found it really interesting because I had to do a talk on resilience. And I thought to myself, and failing. And I thought to myself, and the whole program was actually called Fail. And I thought to myself,
that's
wow.
a bold program title. Like, who's signing up for that? Interestingly enough. Yeah.
Not only who's signing up for that, it's the fact that MIT had a program called Fail when MIT is literally the smartest people on the planet are the only people who go to MIT, right? So these are people who are practically like they're academic, they're geniuses.
Seemingly don't fail.
And
failure's not an option.
Fail.
Yeah.
That's right. They don't fail. Failure is not an option. And so the reason why they had this is because in real life, right, when people are not used to failing, when they do fail, the fall is way harder and way stronger. And so because of that, MIT has a very high suicide rate.
Really? Wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, because
the pressure, the expectation.
Because they're right. Because they're so used to always succeeding and always kind of having things work out for them, that when it actually happens that they do fail, they can't take it. They mentally don't have the stamina and the resilience to take it. So that is why, I found it so interesting, right? And the reason why I'm saying that to you is because sometimes I believe that the more hardship and the more shit that you had to deal with when you were young gives you the resourcefulness and the stamina and the ability to be tough and to take failure better, right? So for me, I failed so many times in my life. Like it became like I said, I had like a master's in failing, right? But I got a PhD in kind of getting myself right back up again.
Yeah.
And doing it and keep on going, because it like I became kind of immune to failure. So if you can get yourself to a place where you become desensitized to failure, you have less of a problem getting right back up and trying for something over and over again. And so for me, when people say, well, you know, they don't feel that they're good enough, they don't feel that they're pretty enough, they don't feel that they're smart enough, that to me is your secret sauce. Being mediocre and being like average or less than average gives you so much more ability to like, you know, basically hit it out of the park, because
That's
have a place to go. Yeah, you have a place to go. You know, it can't get any worse than it is now. So you have the ability and the agency within you to kind of create the life that you really want, right? I did this post yesterday that I like thought of, and it was the fact that, what did I say yesterday? Because it was that basically you have in this life, it's not what you started with. It's like how you kind of, what did you create? What did you make yourself to be? It's not who you started as, but you have the ability to create and turn yourself into whatever it is that you want. And so if you start from a lesser place, you have that much more room to kind of try and fail and then try again on something else and then fail and then do it again. And then to a place where you can kind of morph yourself into the swan that you want to be.
I'm trying to be a swan.
You're a swan.
I'm a peacock, and you gotta let me fly. I was sharing with you my background. So the health coach in me, the optimizer in me, always is kind of hearing and looking for these kind of health wellness analogies. And so when you said the word immune, we become immune to these failures. I liken it to, why do we get sick? It's because we get exposed to something that we have never been exposed to before, or at a higher concentration of it. And our circumstances at the time, i.e. our immune system, are either completely unprepared or just caught off guard. And so if we liken this analogy to failure is those small bombardments against our immune system. And it's not so much, it's just like we become Superman or Superwoman and they just bounce off of us, but they don't have the same effect. So failure is literally making us stronger if we're pausing long enough to just absorb it and take it in and actually consciously choose, this is information, this is education, this is me adding this into my armor so that I can next time have a better support system myself to let this affect me less, or to completely be able to pivot and like use it as a resource,
I agree. I also feel that if I really look back at all my life experiences, and maybe you too, all of those failures have actually led me to my most successful points in my life.
It's the whole reason I'm here. I gave you the whole backstory.
Right, exactly.
That's why I'm here.
So when something happens, I really believe that it didn't happen for a reason, and something else that I don't even know will appear that kind of was the reason for it. Have you ever heard of I don't know if it's a fable or a story, the Chinese farmer
No, I don't
analogy?
Think so. How does it go?
So there's this Chinese farmer, and he had this really amazing killer racehorse, right? And the racehorse ran away. And when the racehorse ran away, the whole like community and all the village comes to his house, and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe it, blah, 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 blah. What are you going to do now? You lost your prize racehorse. You must be so devastated. And he was like, maybe. And then the next day, the horse shows up again. Found the horse, and they all
just comes back home.
They just come back, but maybe a few days later. Okay. I don't know the exact amount of time. Then they come.
Someone's gonna fact check this myth.
No, this is a really very famous story. Then they come back and they're like, "Oh my God, you must be so happy," to the farmer, and he's like, "Maybe." Well, then the next day, his little son goes on the horse, and for a ride, falls off the horse and breaks his leg. And so then all the people come back to him from the village, like, oh my God, you must hate that horse. What a horrible horse. You must be so devastated and so mad. And then again, the farmer was like, maybe. And then the next day, right, the people who are, what do you call it when like the army comes to your place and they're finding the people to go to war?
Not recruiting.
Draft.
The draft.
There's a word for it, but the draft. And they saw the little boy that was hurt, and so he wasn't. They couldn't accept him. So then, of course, the village comes back and says, "Oh, you must be so happy that this boy, that this happened." But point is, you never know how one failure. And the guy says, "Fail, maybe." My point is, that was a long-winded way of saying that you never know how one failure or one experience in your life leads to another thing. So what looks like a failure and what looks like what looks like a tragedy and something that is so awful can actually be it could have been the best thing that could have happened for the next two things in your life to show up, or the next thing to show up, right? And so it's all about perspective, right? You never know. So if you approach life with, that is the worst thing, this failure is going to keep me down, then you're never going to know and see what the other things could have led you to, right? But if you keep an even keel, like the farmer, right, and kind of take life as it comes with very few highs, or not let yourself go too high or not let yourself go too low, but kind of realize that this is just one page in this chapter or one chapter in this book, and the story isn't written out yet. So again, it's like reframing how you think about things. And I know that story, I kind of like botched it a little bit.
No, it's good. But we'll chop it up.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
But it makes me, two things come to mind here. And actually, first is, I love this concept of this too shall pass. And I think when we think about that, it's typically applied to the hardship of, maybe all the people of the village coming to the farmer and going, it's okay, this will pass. Your horse is gone, we'll get through this. Oh, your son is injured, we'll get through this. But if we really want to thrive and to find the opportunity, I'm kind of using, this is my spinoff.
Oh, okay.
This is East meets West here. If we take that same concept of, Jen, congratulations on your book, or maybe the farmer, your horse just won first place and your son just graduated top of his class. Like, to keep that in mind of this too shall pass, I think helps us auto-regulate. It's like bringing our immune system back into homeostasis of when it's super revved up high, we got to bring it down even keel. If it's super low, we got to bring it back up even keel. This concept of this too shall pass, if we can remember to think of that when we're going through the shit, but also when we're at the top of the mountain and we're feeling on top of the world and successful, it will help bring us back to our homeostasis so that we can have, I think, clarity of what to do next and how to do it next. But secondly, and I'm curious to get your kind of input on this. There's a shout out Dominic, a guy in our mentorship program. He's a pretty young guy, and he's like doing really well, thriving in life, graduated college, football player, all this stuff. And he is like almost looking for bad things to happen, in the sense of, he's like, I hear so much about people talking about when you fail, you learn, you bounce back from your failures. And he's like, other than maybe not starting on a game that I wanted to, like, I haven't suffered. I haven't failed in business. I haven't had a horrible relationship blow up. I haven't experienced a lot of these things like people are saying. So he's like, how do I find failure? so that I can learn from it.
Right,
you know?
right.
What's your take on that? Is that even
just wait? No, I mean,
true? Yeah,
lucky guy.
Yeah, I mean, after I think it's like 23. So I mean, like, get to your early 20s, truly, life will hand you a shit sandwich every once in a while. But
right. Well, then I guess that's they will. It will happen to him. So that's why I was kind of teasing him, but
really,
wait.
yeah, just wait.
I mean, again, it's kind of reminds me of this MIT thing, right? Like, that to me is actually a detriment to somebody if they've gotten through life without feeling any pain or any failure. And to me, I just don't relate to those people, right? Because I've been someone who wasn't a great student, and I had a lot of like things to overcome, and not severe, thank God, right? But still, like things that kind of popped up that weren't so phenomenal.
Like what to do with Keanu Reeves when he comes into your home.
Right, like Keanu, exactly. Like something as simple as that.
You guys got to check out her story and work on that story.
Right? No, but I feel like someone who hasn't really had the struggle, like it makes it much, much more difficult. Like, don't go looking for it. Brace yourself. I would tell your friend Dominic to brace himself, because it will happen.
And keep doing the things like he's doing to prepare.
And keep on doing the things that you're doing. And I think everybody's different, right? And I think that if you were fortunate enough to get to that stage of life without having any kind of situation or trauma, that's phenomenal. But I find that to build true grit, that I think is really important, is built out of hardship, right? So I haven't met someone yet that I've met in my life that's been that interesting as an adult, who has had who's had no problems. To me, those people are very vanilla. There's like nothing there. There's no character built. There's no grit built. There's no, actually, there's nothing. It's blah. Like, it's bland to me. The people to me that are the most interesting and who've kind of like really had to like build themselves from nothing are the ones that I gravitate to.
Yeah.
Right? That's for me anyway.
And I'm with you. And I would even take it a step further and say, I think a lot of us, myself included, lacking the EQ, lacking the emotional intelligence, years ago, before I kind of had my own, jarring wake up chase moment. We probably have. But I think so many of us choose to not acknowledge them. We don't want to face the hardship. We don't want to face the pain, the suffering. So we have coping mechanisms. We distract ourselves. We shove it down. When what we're doing is we're missing such amazing opportunity, just because in the front of it is pain, is suffering, is being uncomfortable. Nobody wants to really sit with that. I mean, it's not human nature.
No,
right?
It's not comfortable.
Exactly. So I think, to your point of, there are definitely some people out there like that, but I'd be willing to take it a step further and say, you just either don't know it or you're choosing to ignore it.
Right. I also think that there's no, if you're good, maybe some people, this is not a blanket statement, but I believe that everyone has things that they're really, really strong in, and things that they're not so great in, right? So if someone who's really academically really brilliant, chances are they maybe have to work on their emotional intelligence.
Street smarts.
Yeah. On
interpersonal skills.
Interpersonal skills, right? Because like there has to always be a yin to your yang, right? So maybe, like, to your point, he doesn't see this he doesn't see that stuff because he doesn't have the self-awareness yet to even know what that even looks like, right?
Perhaps, yeah.
And I believe to have a really rich life, and that's not about money and having fame and nice cars and a boat. I'm talking about real relationships that
joy,
are
fulfillment,
meaningful, yes, and having having a life that's satiating and fulfilling is way more about experiences and interpersonal relationships than that stuff. So I would say really kind of like lean into those things and develop those and harness those things.
Well, I want to fast forward a little bit as we get towards the end here, because as we're going live here, we're in 2023. Welcome to the future, everybody. Greetings from Jen and Chase in 2022.
Yes. Greetings.
Living a bigger, better, bolder life. I think it's perfect timing, new year, new me, all this stuff that people want to gravitate towards.
Right.
But let's get very real and tactical. Here we are now. The world has changed so much over the last several years. I think we're all in a moment now of I not only want more for my life, but I need more for my life because my life has probably been challenged in ways I haven't ever experienced the last 2-3 years. Mm-hmm. What's your number one tip for somebody listening right now to really embark on 2023, but to also then look at the end, when they're at the end of 2023 and go, like, this was not just a goal that went away so frivolously. This is something that I implemented and I've maintained, and it's a very real habit of my life right now. Okay,
well, I'm going to say that I think a lot of times we throw a big net and then we kind of don't don't really focus on the one thing. And then everything kind of just like sits in this like place of but not purgatory so much as just like okayness, right?
Yeah.
I would say to pick one thing to focus on for the new year and really lean hard on that and then make 10 attempts at getting that thing. So I call this thing, it's called the 10% target. And why it's called that is that I pick one thing and then I make 10 attempts at getting that. And the reason is, and we said this earlier, is because number one, you get comfortable and more immune and desensitized to failing by just going through the process. But also, you may not get that one goal, but you will learn. You will find an opportunity that maybe you never even knew existed.
Oh, so true.
Right?
So true. Yeah.
And that is why it's called the 10% target, is because it's not just about getting the goal. It's about going through the process and what you get from that process. And
the goal might even probably change.
Well,
if you're that committed to the process, I think, in my experience too.
100%. Yeah. And I tell people, you can go, don't think, and to me, don't be so focused on the goal. Be open, have that open mind to see what other things are coming from the other directions.
Be goal-oriented, but don't keep your blinders on.
Absolutely.
In pursuit of that goal. Absolutely.
And be specific, right, for that one thing, right? Because I think what happens in the new year, and from a health and wellness perspective, right, people say they keep their goals too lofty. Like, I want to lose weight. All right, well, okay, but don't you think if you had a more specific goal in place, like I want to lose 5 pounds, I want to get stronger, I want to be able to run a marathon, like have something that that's more strategic and methodical
and actionable,
right? Actionable. Otherwise, it's just kind of stays there and nothing really happens. And then you're right back to the following year in 2024 in the same place you were in 2023.
Trying to lose the same weight you've been trying to lose every year for the past 5 years.
Right.
Insert your goal here.
And have intention. Create a platform for yourself to win, right? So you can succeed. So that's why I'm a big believer, and we said this maybe off camera, I don't remember, but about
it's all
habits.
on camera here.
It's all on camera. It's about creating healthy habits to make you on point and to optimize your life, right? Because we get in our own way more than anybody else, right? I'm my worst enemy. You are your worst enemy. No matter what you want to think and say, you can blame others all you want, but it's you who gets in your way the most. So create places, and if you have a trigger or you have an issue, create places where those things won't happen as much, right? That's why I'm a big habit stacker and a big habit believer. And people can think it's regimented or not, but it keeps me on point and it gets me to where I want to go. So don't just be willy-nilly and just be like, oh, things are going to just happen because it will happen. Nothing ever happens like that. Very rarely. In the movies it does, but not in real life.
Cut Willy and Nilly out of your life for good. If you meet any Willies or Nillys, say, I'm sorry, I can't accept new friends right now. But it reminds me of this phrase that I've latched onto for years from, Sean Stevenson.
Yeah.
Stack the conditions in your favor.
Exactly.
And what he means, what I interpret that to mean is these small little things that we can count as wins throughout the day that are our habits that serve the mind, the body, the soul. But then when you look back, it's like, oh shit, I've been compounding success this whole time. Which leads me to my last question. All these things we've been talking about, absolutely, if we can absorb them and then apply them, compound into success to move us forward in life, to live a life ever forward. But what does that mean to you? when you hear those two words, just how would you describe it? How do you live a life ever forward?
I think living true and living authentically and being myself and building and having relationships and a life that is meaningful and not phony and external to me. I feel like we get very caught up. And so having those things that are really important close to me, and those are relationships. I want my kids to be around me, right? To me, that's a really big indicator. If your kids want to be around you or don't want to be around you, I think that can tell you something right there. And to me, those are the most important things in my life. I mean, everything else is not even secondary. And so you have to take like a mental check and be self-aware and know what's really important to you and live true.
How do we live true, though? That could be a whole nother conversation. But it just makes me think, in combination with what you said about being around your children and your children wanting to be around you, what if we apply that to ourselves? I think in our truest, rawest form, do we even want to be around ourselves? And if the answer to that question is yes, then you're on to something. The answer to that question is no. Like, that's okay, but like lean into that. That's the whole point of what we've been talking about here. Your truth is like waiting on the other side of that uncomfortableness with yourself, I think.
I totally agree. But you have to have the desire. You have to have the desire and the
courage really,
to take a deep look into what's important to you, and then create that life for yourself.
Well, you've got a book here that is out now that can help you do just that. Bigger, Better, Bolder. I'm going to have this all down in the show notes for everybody. I was able to go through, we didn't get to, well, in a way, inadvertently, I had quite a few more dog years to target, but you know what? We'll just have to get you back and we'll go again.
We'll come back. Yes. Part 2.
So, but let everybody know where they can connect with you and to get the book and all that.
Well, they can. I'm speaking of social media. They can find me on Instagram, The Real Jen Cohen, TikTok, same. My website, Jennifer Cohen. All the regular places, and you can get the book on Amazon or Barnes and Noble wherever fine books are sold. And
like I said, it's all be linked for you down in the show notes. We take care of everybody in the episode resources. Jen, this is great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure.